Alrighty, welcome to another podcast episode. It's Sunday morning here in Sweden. Happy first Advent to all of you guys out there. To be honest, I was thinking about maybe setting up a candle situation here. Get like 4 candles, and then each Sunday when I record the podcast, I light another candle. Would be kind of a nice ritual, but of course I simply forgot about buying the candles. Thought about it a couple of days ago and then it slipped my mind again. So therefore no candles today. Maybe a week from now I have the 4 candles and then we can light the second candle together on this podcast. Make it like a weekly December tradition. How are you guys? I'm pretty good. Last Sunday I was sick, as you remember. Was coughing quite a lot. I had a sore throat, a little bit of a headache, maybe even a little bit of a fever, not sure. So actually the last week I mostly spent just making sure that I live healthy, really as healthy as possible to make sure that the sickness goes away. And I would say that I succeeded. Still have a little bit of a cold, to be honest, or at least a cough. But I don't think it's going to be any problem with this podcast. As you can hear, my voice is normal again, which is good when you're recording for an hour straight. Hopefully I'm not going to lose my voice halfway. If I do, got my water here. But yeah, the last couple of days I've really just spent making sure that I go to bed early, making sure that I get at least my 7 to 8 hours of sleep, making sure that I eating kind of healthy, partly because I wanted to get rid of that sickness as quickly as possible, but also because I told you guys I am training for the sports event of the year, at least for me. The Christmas liftoff is coming up in 3 weeks. I'm super pumped. Buddy of mine from London who is also training almost every day for it. Super excited as well. So we're challenging each other to go beyond our limits, making sure that we eat healthy, always sending each other pictures of our food, which I agree is a little bit weird, but hey, whatever makes you, keep going healthy and keep going strong. So the last week I really made sure that I can still go to the gym even though I felt a little bit under the weather. Didn't train as hard, but went training at least a little bit. So I did my, my overhead presses with a little less weight. I did my bench press yesterday, which felt surprisingly good. Really getting there. Last year I benched 82 kilos, if I remember correctly, 82.5. And yesterday I almost benched 80 kilos, so I'm really getting close to my personal best there. And in 3 weeks, it's time to show, time to shine, time to show the other person, my body, what I've been training for the entire year. So that's going to be exciting. And I really noticed the importance of making sure that everything else in your life is just, top notch, and you're really trying your best to just make sure that you're rested, that you're sleeping enough, that you're eating clean, all these different things. They're really minor things, but if you put them all together, they play a huge role in just performing as well as you can. In whichever area. I mean, might be for your job, might be for training in the gym, might be for being as creative as possible, being the best parent you can be. Whatever it is that you try to focus on, you have to make sure that you not only focus on that particular area of your life and really excelling in that area, but also making sure that everything else in your life is up to a high standard as well. So of course right now for me it is a little bit easy to sleep enough because, as I mentioned, I'm probably not gonna continue with my company, at least not full time. I'm gonna start a new job a week from now. So until then I don't want to say I'm on vacation because I do go to work every day. I do work on my videos. I do work on other things. But I definitely have a little bit more time than I used to have. So that allows me to sleep in sometimes a little bit. And that allows me to be rested every day. On top of that, I make sure that I get, enough calories during the day, make sure that I get enough protein. I add a shit ton of peanut butter to pretty much everything I eat every day nowadays. So in the morning already for my oatmeal that I prepare for myself, I would throw in at least 1 scoop of peanut butter, which adds a shit ton of calories and a lot of protein on top, and really healthy protein. So that's really good. I've been making sure that I get enough calories by eating a lot of brown rice, which for me is one of the greatest sources of calories there is. First of all, because it's super cheap. You get a package of a kilo of brown rice for, 20 crowns maybe. So that's what, $2.50 maybe? It's insanely cheap and you get like 20 meals out of it maybe. So I'm just eating shit tons of brown rice, sometimes twice a day for lunch and for dinner in the evening. I usually prepare it with a lot of vegetables and then maybe some meat, either minced meat or chicken. On top of that, I started cooking more with what is called coconut oil, which also I think has really healthy fats and adds a lot of calories as well if you just throw in a scoop of coconut oil. I mean, granted, everything tastes like coconut after doing that, but that's just something that I have to endure, I guess. And honestly, it doesn't taste that bad. Like, after a while, you get a little bit tired of it. If you do it for weeks and you eat every day stuff that only tastes like coconut, you do get a little bit sick of it. But right now, I feel like, this is a pleasant change in diet. So yeah, just making sure my diet is on point, my sleeping is on point, everything else is fine in life. Here in Sweden, getting really dark right now. We have approximately like 6 hours of sunlight, I think. But that means not really sunlight, it means daylight. So you really got to make sure that you go out a little bit every day and you get a little bit of this daylight, even though it's still kind of gray and rainy all the time for the last couple of days. But just going outside already helps. And then on top of that, I really try to make sure that I do things that I know will make me happy. And to be honest, this took me a little while to figure out. I mean, here in Sweden it's very common in the winter that you take vitamin D, for example, because as most of you know, vitamin D you produce while being in the sunlight, while being exposed to the sun. Your skin starts producing the vitamin D. So if you don't get enough sunlight, you don't get enough vitamin D and you need to supplement a little bit. So a lot of people do that to make sure they don't get too depressed, I guess. And I guess I should start taking my vitamin D as well. I haven't gotten around to it yet, to be honest. But I do make sure that at least every weekend I schedule things that are, just fun. It's not about like developing yourself necessarily. It's not about like pushing your limits or, the usual stuff that I talk about in these videos. It's gonna be none of that. Instead, I just make sure that I genuinely feel happy in those moments and I try to increase this kind of feeling and these kind of situations as we go deeper into the winter. So for example, yesterday I went to a museum with my girlfriend and 2 other friends. We had a great time. After that we had some coffee. It was really nice. Learned a little bit about Swedish history in the museum, which is always cool because I'm an immigrant here, even though I know a little bit of Swedish history, obviously, like about the Vikings and that kind of stuff. Of course, I know a lot less than people who grew up here and who went to high school here and spent probably years studying that stuff. So it's always cool to, expand your horizon a little bit. But really the focus there was not to like learn a lot, but simply to just plan a fun activity during the weekend. And then later today, as I'm recording this, it's barely 11 o'clock right now on a Sunday morning. So really trying to be on top of my shit here, trying to bang out the podcast as early in the day as possible so you guys can listen to it later. And then later, me and my girlfriend, we're gonna meet some friends, we're gonna watch some Christmas movies, definitely Bad Santa, which is a fantastic and hilarious Christmas movie, I think, with Billy Bob Thornton. Highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out. And then one of my all-time classics, Love Actually. Probably my favorite romantic comedy, which, can be a little bit weird to admit, but I love that movie. I find it so hilarious. I watch it at least once a year, usually during Christmas time because it is a Christmas movie. All the actors are A-level actors. Fantastic humor, like the British humor, not so much American, which, I can relate a lot to the British humor. I really find it enjoyable. So that's what we're gonna do today. And again, it's just gonna be a chill Sunday. It's gonna get dark at like 2:30 probably. So it's not like you have a very long day anyway to do stuff. But yeah, we're just gonna drink glögg, which is something like hot wine. And we're gonna eat some cookies and we're gonna enjoy ourselves. Because now it is Christmas time, or at least beginning of Christmas time. First Advent today. So we have like 4 more weeks until Christmas. Pretty much exactly. No, less even. Shit, it's like 3.5 weeks. Jesus Christ. And I really feel like this is a good habit to become a little bit calmer and reflect a little bit on yourself, reflect on the past year that you had, reflect on what is really important to you in your life, and then do more of that. Like calm down a little bit. You have the entire year to rush around and be hectic and be busy with whatever it is that you're doing. But I feel like it is a good habit to have one time of the year where you calm down and you take things a little bit more easy. And then you go recharge into the new year, right? So I'm looking forward to it. It's probably one of the favorite times of the year for me. Really love Christmas time. Not only because I get to eat a lot of cookies and not feel bad about it, but also because I get to go home, of course. I have a really big family back in Germany. So since I live abroad, I don't see them as much as I would like to. But during Christmas, everyone gets together. They all live in the same area of Germany, basically. So we all celebrate together and we're gonna have a great time. All right, so that's it about Christmas. A couple of things that I wanted to talk about today in this podcast. Made a list here even, so I don't forget anything. And we can kind of go through it one by one. So, excuse me. One thing I was thinking about, especially with this podcast, I kind of know that I'm a little bit late to the party, right? Podcasting has been a thing for what? More than 10 years now? I think it started around like the social media explosion. So like 2005, 2006, something like that. So yeah, starting this podcast is definitely not like a unique idea. It's not like nobody has ever done it before. In fact, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of podcasts out there. Definitely hundreds of thousands only in English. So I do realize that I'm a little bit late here, a little bit lagging behind, and I noticed that you just have such a huge advantage if you're early. Whichever technology it is, whichever medium it is that is booming and that is really gaining momentum, you want to be early on it. And if you are, then you have such a huge advantage. Like just talking about podcasts, if you look at all the podcasts basically that are really big these days, they are all podcasts that started a long time ago. And it's only now that they're really reaching like the masses of people. People who are into podcasting, they've known them for a long time. But it really takes a while to like saturate society and really reach people who are maybe not that into podcasts usually. So if you think of like the Joe Rogan Experience, probably still the biggest podcast out there. Another one that I mentioned before on this podcast is the podcast of Bill Burr, the comedian. Fantastic guy. He kind of does the same format as me here. He basically just talks by himself, but he's a comedian, so I guess he's a lot funnier than I am. Just banging out joke after joke after joke every 10 to 15 seconds. It's kind of amazing, this guy. I mean, he's just riffing it, and it's just coming out of him, you know? It's like it's scripted. It's like he's prepared and like learned it by heart, but he's just improvising. And he's doing that for an hour straight, and it's incredibly hilarious to listen to. I love his podcast. But long story short, he started also 10 years ago. So it is amazing to see how long these people have been doing it until they really hit it big. And I noticed that with my own little thing that I'm doing here with the podcast, but also with the YouTube. If I had gotten on YouTube 2006, like very early on, probably I would be like at 1 million subscribers now. First of all, of course, because you just have like 10 plus years to actually master the craft, and my videos would look probably very different than they look now if I had been doing this for 10 years and not for like 1.5. But you do also have this undeniable advantage if you go into technology early. So I was a little bit frustrated about that, and I was like, shit, like there were so many opportunities 10 years ago when I was 18. I should have done so many things and I missed all of them. Another one was like stock market. I was really into the stock market actually when I was like 18, and it was right around the time when the biggest financial crisis in 70 years hit the world economy, like a subprime crisis, 2008. I just started studying economics and finance in that same year. So it was a crazy coincidence. I was super into it naturally because I studied all of that shit, and then at the same time it was constantly on the news. People were talking about it. People were like, oh, everything's going to hell. You should buy gold because the world economy is going to collapse. All this crazy talk. And I even did buy stocks back then. Like I got into it early. I got into it at the right time. But then I sold too early again. I didn't sit it out. And what did we have? Since then, it's been the greatest bull market in like 12 years, or for 12 consecutive years, I gotta say. But the greatest bull market in decades. So another thing where I felt like, shit, I should have stuck it out. I really should have, stick to my guns. But instead, I kind of missed that too. And the same with like YouTube, with podcasting, even with blogging. I used to blog a lot. I used to write stuff, but I was kind of late to the party as well. So what would have happened if I had been early there? Probably really would live a different life now. Maybe really would have made it big, just because there was a lot less competition in all of these different fields. So, okay, I was going down that train of thought and getting a little bummed out about it. And then I realized that this is not actually a healthy mindset to have. Like, what you should think instead is each decade, each year has its own unique opportunities. And it is up to you to find these opportunities and then jump on board with them, take advantage of them. But it is, of course, stupid to think that there are no more opportunities these days. It's stupid to think that there's not another YouTube in the making right now that you could be an early adopter with. It's just your job to find it. And I guess 2005, 2006, YouTube just wasn't that big, so I probably had not even heard of it. I don't remember when I heard of YouTube the first time. And all of you guys who are like 15, 16, maybe 18 these days. When you listen to this, you probably can't even imagine a world without YouTube. But I kind of lived through it. Until I became an adult, there was not a thing like YouTube and social media. So I don't know when I first heard about it. But probably I would not have thought that it would become as big as it is these days. So it makes sense that I didn't get on board with it. So what I was getting at is that you need to find the thing that is the next YouTube nowadays. You have to find the next opportunity. You have to find the next chance to be a little bit ahead of the curve. And then go all in and just pray that it works out and pray that this thing that you're betting on is actually going to blow up. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do now. I try to walk through the world with open eyes. I try to make sure that if there is an opportunity that arises and where I feel like, damn, this is really intriguing and this really makes sense for such a big part of our population to get into. And I try to find out about this earlier than other people. Then I try to go on it, try to put all chips on that one thing, put all eggs in my one basket. And obviously one of the things that everyone talks about is like virtual reality or augmented reality or AI in whichever form, like all these different technologies. But as far as I know, there's not a real mainstream way of using that until now. And I'm far too stupid to like actually understand the technology behind it and get into it on that level, like starting my own company and like working with it or something like that. I just don't have the know-how for that. But as soon as there's like a mainstream access to something like that and something that is scalable within these fields, I'm going to jump on it. Because that's going to be the next big thing, I think. So you want to be one of the early adopters. There's this chart, maybe I can find it real quick. There's this chart of how things that are new and that are unknown spread through society and spread through the market that it essentially tries to conquer. Early adopters, just 1 second here. And it has like 4 or 5 phases. There we go. Okay, so first you have the innovators. These are probably the people who make up that stuff, like the people who invented YouTube, for example. But then you very quickly after that have the early adopters, and it's kind of like a bell curve going there. So you have the early adopters, then you have the early majority, so that's kind of the tipping point where it really goes mainstream. Then you have the late majority, and then you have the laggards. That's people who, they just stick to their guns. They don't jump on board until like everybody has something, and then they kind of feel pressured into it. So you want to make sure that you're probably knowing innovators, people who are really really close to innovation happening, or they're the ones making it happen themselves. And then you want to be the early adopters to get a little bit of competitive advantage. So I feel like that's a really interesting thing to think about, because it is a little bit dumb to try do something like I'm doing here with my podcast that has been done hundreds of thousands of times before. It's really difficult to stand out there just because the market is so big and the competition is so big, especially if it's something that is completely for free, like YouTube videos, like podcasts. There's really not a lot of, how is that called? I'm missing the word here. But there's not a lot of costs to get into that sort of thing. I mean, all I have is like a video camera here and a little bit of a sound system, like a microphone and a receiver, but that's really it. And then I upload it on YouTube, and then boom, I'm a YouTuber. So yeah, you want to have this mentality that you're always looking for the next best thing and not just leeching onto the thing that has been done countless times before. I mean, there's this old saying, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, but the second best time is today. Like, of course, it still makes sense for me to do this podcast if I really want to do it. Still makes sense for me to do YouTube if I want to, expand my audience. It's simply the best way to communicate with people these days, I think, especially if you have a message to get across. So still, the second best time to do it is today, which is what I'm doing. But it would have been a lot better to get into it 10 years ago. All right, so jumping across different topics here. The Four Agreements. It's a book that I bought last week. I talked about it a little bit. I went on this pretty big book haul on Amazon, just buying stuff that I wanted to read for a long time. And The Four Agreements was a book that I knew next to nothing about, except that it's been among the best-selling non-fiction books on Amazon for several years in a row now. It's kind of about personal development. It's definitely self-help. And it's a little bit spiritual. Like, that's basically all I knew. So I thought I'm gonna give it a try, and I read it during the last week. So I thought I'm gonna give you a couple of my thoughts on it. Long story short, didn't like it that much. It is pretty much exactly what I expected. Very spiritual, very out there, a little bit esoteric even. The guy who wrote it, if I got it right, I'm not exactly sure, but he's part of like a group of healers that are originally like from Mexico, or at least this like culture and mindset is developed originally in Mexico. So he writes about that, and then he goes into these like 4 agreements that people should make, which are: be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. I mean, not really mind-blowing stuff right there, right? And then on top of that, it's very spiritual. For me, it's a little bit too far out there, to be honest. He talks like with the first one, be impeccable with your word. Like he says, if you talk nicely or if you say nice things and positive things, that's like white magic, because you can improve the world around you and help the people around you, which I guess makes sense. Not disagreeing with that or anything. But then if you say negative things, he calls that black magic, and he says it can ruin people's lives, and it can like ruin their mindset, and it can really harm them, which again I kind of agree with. But then he paints everything with a very broad brush. He's like, oh, you should never use this black magic type of wording because it harms people. And I'm like, no, I mean, sometimes you have to give it to people straight. Like, sometimes you got to be a little bit harsh on people. Like, if you're a manager in a company and one of your employees is fucking up, you got to sit him down and be like, listen, man, you've been fucking up. What's up with that? And that has nothing to do with harming that person or being mean to that person. It has to do with helping that person realize its own flaws, realize its shortcomings, and helping that person fix them and improve on them and develop themselves and their character. Like, you need negative feedback too. It's not like everything is rainbow and shiny sunshine. There are shitty things going on in the world, and you got to be able to address that. So to sit here and write a book calling that black magic, I think it's a bit counterproductive. That being said, I do realize that every single person you interact with and every single book you read, every source of information that you consume always has something that you can take away from. And that's kind of the approach that I've been taking, especially with books that I don't entirely agree with. And I did the same here. So a lot of the things in this book I find a little bit too far out there, or I straight up disagree with. But there's always takeaways that are worth incorporating into your own routine, or at least worth thinking about more. So for example, with this first agreement that he mentions here in this book, be impeccable with your word. I think there's a lot of truth to it. Like, even though I said that you shouldn't hold back if there's something worth criticizing and worth pointing out that some people are not doing their best at. I do think it's also worth realizing that your word does have power, and it oftentimes has more power than you originally might anticipate. I mean, it is true what he says, that especially as a kid, you could hear something, and even though the other person who said something mean to you didn't even mean it that badly, like, I don't know, if it's like the kid on the playground, you know, like, ugh, you're ugly. What does that fucking kid know, right? I mean, there's no reason to take that kid seriously at all, but it can really hurt you, and it can really stick with you for a long time. So your word does have power, and it is important to be aware of that. And I think it is kind of a fair point that you use your word and your, just any interaction with people for the better, and you use it to improve them and not to just mindlessly criticize them or put them down, even try to break them or something, which can be common. Some people do that, and I'm not debating that, and that is something that needs to be addressed. So even though a lot of the things in this book are not exactly my kind of style, I did get something out of it, and I did get some pointers of things that I could also reflect on, things that I can improve on, things where I feel like, okay, I really have room for improvement there and room for becoming a better version of myself in that regard. So, it was $5. Now I read it, now I have an informed opinion on the book. If somebody ever mentions it to me again, I can talk about it, and got some nice ideas out of it, at least. All right. Another thing that I was thinking a lot about this week is something that I also made a video about a couple of days ago. I published it on Friday, shot it on Thursday. Sorry that the lighting was not that great, by the way, but as I mentioned, here in Sweden, I haven't seen the sun in like 10 days. So it's getting really difficult to film my videos and not have a completely disastrous lighting situation. I'm trying my very best, right? But until I get my own very studio where I shoot my videos at perfect lighting and perfect sound situations, you kind of have to suffer through the stuff that I'm uploading during the winter months now in Sweden. So I was talking in this video about detaching yourself from your ego. And that's something that has been rumbling around in my head for a couple of days, if not weeks now, because the ego is such a omnipresent thing. Like, usually we're not consciously aware of it most of the time, but at the same time, so many things during our daily life are simply being done because our ego is attached to it. It's not actually because we care that much, but it's our ego that leeches off of it. Like, we draw energy out of the likes that we get on Facebook. We get energy, or our ego rather feeds through, I don't know, positive comments on YouTube after I upload a video. And I realized that, I love that. I love when I get a lot of views on my YouTube videos. I love when I get a lot of comments on my YouTube videos saying, oh, this is fantastic, keep doing what you're doing, Like, my ego loves that. So I started noticing that, and I started thinking more about it, and started thinking about all the things that I'm probably doing to feed my ego, and thinking, okay, how can I diminish that, or eventually get rid of that once and for all. And it's a damn hard thing to do. And I think for most people at some point it has a lot to do with like your status and with your money, with your income, with the job that you have, simply because we spend so much time on it. And yeah, it's worth asking, why do we spend so much time on jobs that we maybe don't particularly like even? Like, is it our ego that loves that we are called manager? Is it our ego that loves that we get a big fat paycheck at the end of the month, even though we didn't enjoy a minute of working in that company? Like, all of these things are, I think, worth thinking about and at least reflecting on. So you don't go down a road where you're doing things solely for your ego. So yeah, I've been trying to detach myself from that, and I've been thinking about especially that factor money, because I haven't had a lot of money the last year because I was doing my own company, basically having no income, giving up a job where I at least had a stable income. So money was a constant factor the last couple of months, or the last 15 months that I've been doing my company. And I was thinking, okay, what is the real value of money for me? For me, the answer that I have right now, and it's not like a definite answer, but I think it's getting closer and closer to the truth. For me, money is a way to have a way to be free to discover what I want to do and what I'm able to give back to the world. Now, what do I mean by that? Very mixed up sentence there, but what I mean by that is that you should do something with your time, I believe. With the time that you have in your lifespan, you should do things that benefit the people around you, that benefit the community, essentially having a job. But you should also try to get as close as possible to who you really are at your core. Like, what are your values? What are your belief systems? What is it that is important to you? All of these things are things that I think it really helps to discover about yourself, and you're never really done with that. Like, you just zigzag your way through life and you try to go deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole and try to get closer and closer to the truth and to your core as a person and as a human being living this life, whatever the fuck this is exactly. So money should really facilitate that. Money should not be a reason that you can't explore these things about yourself. Money should be a way that you have the freedom, that you have the opportunity to do all these things, even if that means that you at some point feel like you need to make a change in your life. Even if that means that you at some point need to switch careers because what you have been doing for a while doesn't work for you any longer, and you feel like, okay, I need to mix this up in order to be truer to myself and to provide the most value possible to the community. So money provides flexibility. Money provides opportunity. Oh, geez, my throat starts really hurting here. And I feel like that is what a job should do, and that's what money should do, rather than imprisoning you, rather than telling you what you can't do, because instead of doing what you actually want to do, you have to earn a living, you have to make money. Now, granted, this is very idealistic. Of course, you do have to make a living. Of course, you do need to make money, but I feel like the ultimate goal should not be to become as rich as possible or have like the fanciest stuff to buy, but actually the goal should be that you have the freedom to be whoever you want to be without a lot of restrictions. And And I think I've done, like talking about myself and my own development and personal growth, if you want to call it like that, in the last maybe 15 years. I think I've done a pretty good job listening to myself and listening to what will provide the greatest benefit to my own growth, and then following that path and not be too restricted by materialistic concerns or other concerns that could be out there. Like, I don't know, what do people think of me? Or what do my parents want for me instead of what would I want for myself? Like all of these things that are holding a lot of people back. I was never really affected by that much. Of course, that leads you to a point where, okay, now I'm 30 and I'm going back to a job next week, but it's not exactly what I have studied for. Like, you know, there's a lot of this zigzagging in life that leads you to maybe not being this straight line guy that maybe has the fantastic career and just climbs the corporate ladder really fast because he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do every step of the way. Jesus. But I do feel like with everything I do get closer to expressing myself as clearly and as honestly as possible, and expressing who I am at my core through what I do as well as possible. You know, and that has been in very different ways. Like when I was 20 and I started studying, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, I was really into finance. And I thought, Jesus, my throat hurts. And I thought, okay, making a lot of money is the way to go. And learning about stock exchange and finance and all these things is super fascinating. Corporate banking, I thought, is like my dream job, and like working 100-hour work weeks and then making a boatload every month. I thought that's like fantastic. So that's one of the reasons why I did study finance. And then I got deeper and deeper into it, and I realized, oh shit, this is actually not for me. Different reasons. First of all, I don't like to work that hard. Like I do like to work hard, but I don't like to work like every weekend, all weekend. Like investment banking kind of people. Secondly, I realized I'm not that great with numbers. Like, you know, I passed all of my exams. I did fairly well in my bachelor, nothing to complain about, but I'm not talented for it. Like, it's not who I am. I'm not a numbers guy, even though I can handle it. I'm more like, you know, I like talking. Obviously, been talking for like 45 minutes as of now. And then I discovered that. And I also realized that money actually only sounds good in theory, like being rich somehow sounded cool to me when I was like 19, 20. But it was not as important to me as other things like friendship or making new experiences or travel. And I realized that I'm willing to give up a lot of money, a lot of possible income, just to have more unique experiences and great experiences that allow me to grow. So I kind of moved away from the finance thing. And then at that point I was like maybe 22, 23, finishing up my bachelor, and I realized, oh shit, I've been this like kind of number nerd sitting in the library study finance for many, many years. I kind of lack the social skills that I would have in order to, you know, make all these great experiences that I was dreaming of. Like meeting people from all around the world and making friendships and dating different girls and like hooking up with girls that I can't even talk with because they don't speak English and I don't speak their language. Like all of these great experiences that I was dreaming of when I was like 23, 24. And that I felt like I really have this urge to live that out. I didn't have the skills for that. So then I got really into like personal development in the sense of social skills and dating skills and everything that you can learn around that. And there's a whole community for that. It was kind of a deep rabbit hole to go down, and it was quite the ride. And I learned a lot from it, like I felt like I got closer to who I am at my core by doing that. And I did that until I was like 26, 27, when I graduated from my second master here in Sweden. And then I realized, oh shit, because I've been going out so much, training my social skills, I've been partying a lot and, not living maybe the healthiest of lifestyles. I noticed, okay, there's a lot of areas that I've neglected. So I should make sure that I know a lot more about training, about working out, about how to be more disciplined, about nutrition, like all of these things. So I went down that rabbit hole without any restrictions, even though at that point I should have started working. I took another year basically off to go to China and work there as an English teacher, which was a great experience for me. It was a great opportunity to take. And I think a lot of people would not have taken that chance because, they had the idea, okay, I finished studying, I should start working now. I was never really restricted by that. And I'm not saying that's like a great thing to do, to not earn a living because you feel like you want to see the world more, but that's what I did. I'm just telling you what I did. I'm not saying this is like the right way to do it. But what I am saying is that it helped me to get more in tune with myself and find out who I really am and what I really want to do. So all of this, all of these twists and turns along the last 12 years really had their purpose and really shaped who I am today. And I would be saddened if money or my attached ego to materialistic things or other things would restrict me from keep doing what I have been doing those last 12 years. So if I suddenly became this really straight edge guy, like just career and family and that's it, driving a nice Volvo here in Sweden and, spending my days like that, that would not be me. So I will try to find a way to make a living, earn a decent income, give back to the community, provide huge amounts of value to a lot of people, because that's essentially what work is. And that's what you get paid for. Providing value, being the best you can at what you do. All of these things are crucially important, but I do want to integrate it with a lifestyle where I have the freedom to do what I want to do and to change directions if I want to change directions. So that is kind of my take on ego and the role that money plays in ego and attachment to ego, if that makes sense. On that note, this podcasting and my entire YouTube presence, one second. I noticed, of course, a lot of things that are still worth improving on. And one thing is that I really think that I can become better at not telling my audience what to do, but instead showing them. And I realized that, funny enough, this week when I went to my public speaking classes, Toastmasters, the club that I go to every Wednesday, to train my own public speaking, but also to listen to other people doing speeches and seeing how they could improve, helping them, giving them feedback. There was a guy that I gave feedback on his speech, and he was very structured, It was like, okay, point number 1, point number 2, sub-point number 1, sub-point number 4. Very, very structured, good speech, but it could have been so much more enticing if he had just told a story. Like if he had just shown us the concept that he was talking about instead of actually listing them and forcing us essentially to memorize them. If he had just told a story instead, it would have been so much more entertaining, so much more enticing, and simply so much easier to remember all of the things that he wanted to get across. So this is really something that I feel I still need to work on with this YouTube presence. And doing this podcast is part of it. I feel like with podcasting and with just rambling for an hour straight, I force myself into a situation where I become better at storytelling. I become better at just making stories as interesting as possible. And I realized that this is not maybe a feature that I inherently have. I think I'm a fairly good speaker, but I could become a lot better at telling anecdotes, telling jokes, making it funny, making it interesting. So I'm trying to do a lot more of that. And the same with my normal YouTube videos that are not this long and not podcasting style. I'm gonna try to do a lot more of actually showing you what I'm talking about. Like, I don't know, wrapping the whole concept that I wanted to get across into a short little story, like 5 to 10 minutes on a normal YouTube video, other than standing in front of a white wall lecturing you. I realize that this is not the best way to go about it, and I'm gonna come up with concepts to do that better in the future. Probably with the new year, I'm gonna really focus on that and start working on that more, because I realize that it's a lot more entertaining for you guys to watch and a lot better for you to, really understand what I'm talking about. Instead of just listening to my words, I want to show it to you. So yeah, that's something that I have in the back of my head and that I'm constantly pondering over while still doing this kind of format. I am gonna change the format up soon. One more thing that I've been doing with myself and with friends, and again, completely different topic, but I'm just telling you, like personal development stuff that is going on in my head and that I've been trying to implement. One thing that I've been trying to do is think of and you can do it as a home exercise right now. Take a second and think of the 3 things that are most standing between you and complete happiness. Like, what is it that you would say right now is keeping you from completely being happy? Like, not a single problem in the world, complete bliss and joy. I assume none of you guys have that, because I don't even know if it's good to have that, but as a concept, I guess it's something that we're all striving towards. And I think it's good to know exactly and pinpoint, maybe even write down what it is that is holding us back from that. Like, what are the 3 big problems in your life right now? I've been doing this exercise with myself and I came up with 3 things. Can give you really briefly. It's my hip issue. I mentioned before I have some pains in my hip that are getting worse and worse, which is really worrying me because now it's starting to really impact my life dramatically, in the sense that I cannot just walk wherever I want and for however long I want, but it's actually starting to hurt so much that I kind of have to hold myself back there a little bit, which sucks. Then number 2 is still the visa issue with my girlfriend. We're still not 100% sure that she can stay in Sweden, so that sucks. And then number 3 is basically what I talked about in this video at length, finding a way of making a decent income while at the same time being completely true to myself and completely being able to express myself and to grow as a person. So not just settling for the normal corporate job, and being like, okay, take the paycheck and that's it. So those are my 3 big problems. But this is only one half of the exercise, because then you have these problems identified, and of course you can try to solve them. But especially if it's your 3 biggest problems, I assume that they're not that easily solved. It's probably not something that you can fix this afternoon, right? Because if you could, then it really isn't that big of a problem. So what I do, and what I would encourage you to do, is to then take these 3 problems and practice gratitude. So what I mean by that is that you sit down with each problem and you think about how it could be worse and how you're actually lucky to be in such a situation that you can complain about this being a problem. So just giving you an example for me, let's say the visa issue with my girlfriend. It really sucks. Like, we've been going about this for 2 years, and it's been a constant struggle for us for 2 years, mainly for her, obviously, but also for me. It's been really tough on both of us and on our relationship. But how incredibly lucky are we that we have each other? How incredibly lucky are we that we have found each other, which is so rare. I mean, how rare is it that you find somebody that you truly love and that you're so happy to spend time with every single day, and you wake up next to each other and you're just feeling grateful that you can experience that. And to be in a situation like that, to even have found that, is so incredibly lucky and so incredibly rare if you look around you. I mean, how many people have that, right? And how many people get divorced, and how many people break up? How many people never find that, or it takes years for them to find that, and then the other person is not into them even though they would be up for it? Like, there's so many things that could go wrong in that kind of situation. And for us, it's none of that. Our biggest problem is that visa thing, which is an issue, but we're so lucky to be in that situation, even that we want to be with each other that badly that we're willing to go through this entire process and through all this struggle and all these disappointments and the pain that comes with it. Because it's never been about our relationship itself. All of our problems basically have revolved about this issue. So if we get that fixed, I'm gonna go on a limb here and say that we don't have any relationship issues for a very long time, if ever. Let's see. I mean, you never know. Could be that we get married and then in 10 years we get divorced. You never know. But right now I'm really not seeing that. So, you know, practicing gratitude. And practicing gratitude exactly for the situations that originally worried you and that originally pissed you off. I mean, the same thing with my hip. Okay, so I have some pain there. Sucks. I don't know anyone who's 30 and has hip problems. It really sucks, and it's not that common. But how much worse would it be if I had been in a motorcycle accident when I was 18 and I would sit in a wheelchair for the rest of my life? Would I then be happy to go for a 2-hour walk and then afterwards I have a little bit of pain in my hip? Shit, yeah. I would trade in for that in a heartbeat, right? So again, you reframe the entire situation and you turn the whole thing that has been a problem into something actually positive in your life and something that you could be grateful for. So this is something that I've been practicing more because I noticed that some of my problems have been getting to me and have been reducing my overall happiness and life satisfaction. But this exercise really helped, and this, I guess I'm gonna make a short video about this as well for all the people who don't want to sit through this podcast for an hour and then eventually they get to this gem and they never hear about it because they clicked away long ago. So I'm definitely gonna make a short video about this as well because I really think it's a powerful tool to use. But I wanted to share it here because I've been practicing that a lot the last week, and I've been doing it a lot with friends, especially one friend. She recently broke up with her boyfriend, or rather got dumped by her boyfriend. So she's been talking about that a lot, and I try to show her that actually it could be a lot worse. And I think this exercise is a good way to do that without just telling the person like, oh, your problems are not real problems. Because the thing is, what you have to realize, if a person is open enough with you to share their biggest life issues right now, then that's already a great sign of trust, and you shouldn't just look down on that or diminish it. So I try to not do that, but instead I try to steer her mindset and her worldview into a direction where she can see that actually what bothers her so much and what she says makes her unhappy is actually not that bad at all. So I guess that's pretty much it. I have recorded almost an hour now. That's good enough. Gonna make sure to upload this as quickly as possible. Then I'm gonna enjoy my Christmas movie night or Christmas movie afternoon. Jesus Christ, I almost feel like it's getting dark already. It's noon. It's 12 o'clock right now. And maybe you can even see it in the background. It's getting so dark. It's crazy. But yeah, the choices you make, right? I chose to move to Sweden 3 years ago, and here I am, sitting in the darkness, recording my video. But trying to make the best out of it by having an awesome movie night and eating some pepparkakor, like some typical Swedish cookies here. Anyways, thank you guys for tuning in for this first Advent podcast. See you next week for the second Advent. I'm gonna try my best to have candles by then, so we can light them together. Until then, and talk to you soon.